All right, good evening and welcome to MUFON Los Angeles. My name is Steve Murillo. I'm the State Section Director of MUFON LA. And I am proud and pleased to introduce our speaker tonight. Stephen Jones has been contacted and has had an ongoing relationship with a group of intelligent beings that might be described as out of this world. You might know them simply as extraterrestrials or ETs. His contact began in 1962 when he was just 5 years old and continues to this day. He has met small ETs, commonly referred to as the Greys, 9-foot-tall ETs that he calls the light beings, and relatively recently he has encountered beautiful human-like ETs with golden hair and crystal blue eyes. In his book, An Invitation to the Dance, which he offers in the back of the room there, he writes all about his contact experiences, plus his research into related topics of evolution, intelligence, and memory. It's been written for everybody to read, especially if you have no previous knowledge of the subject of ufology. Tonight, Steve's going to share with us some of the information and experiences he has gleaned over the last 50 years of ET contact. He's come all the way from England to do so, so if you would, please put your hands together and give him a warm welcome. Stephen Jones.
In the common vernacular of the age, I am an ET contact experiencer. I would have been known as an abductee at one point, as a contactee, even as a loony toonie amongst certain people. Being a contact experiencer means that I have been in contact with and remain in contact with a group of beings that might best be described as out of this world. Now, when I talk about them to people like yourself, but especially to people outside of our community, I refer to them as extraterrestrial or ETs. Now, I do that because it's the most familiar tag I can give them for other people to understand. I try to steer away from the term alien. They don't like it. In actual fact, during one contact experience, one of the ETs said to me, "You call us alien when the last thing we are is alien." Now, I've worked out what that means, and hopefully by the end of the talk you may have as well. But ET, extraterrestrial, does remain just a term I use. I don't necessarily believe that the ETs that I am in contact with come from a physical planet beyond the Earth. I believe that the three different types of ET that I have had contact with, their point of origin may be something much closer to home and also maybe much more exotic. So who are they? And what do I believe their contact really means? Please allow me to introduce the ETs that I am in contact with. Now, is there anybody turning towards the back door and looking? No, not tonight, I'm afraid. That happened a few weeks ago, I'll tell you about that. There are three different types of ET that I'm in contact with, and let me introduce you to one of the main players. They will come as no surprise to you, but I'm just going to tell you how I see them, up close and personal. So the little details about their appearance that you may not have heard before, you may have. I introduce you to the Greys. They stand between 3 and 4 foot tall. They have large bulbous heads with no hair. They have large bulbous heads, as I say. They have large eyes, large black eyes. They are described as almond-shaped. They start very close to the centre of their head and wrap round, so they sort of come round the side. There is no reflection in the blackness of these eyes. I have been this close, and I have looked for a reflection, and whatever that is, it absorbs light and does not reflect. Their skin is very pale and has been likened in texture to that of a dolphin. With regards to their eyes, there is no apparent iris or pupil. There is just this blackness. Now, as I understand it, their physical eye that they see out of is underneath this blackness. That this blackness is in actual fact a lens cover that would suggest that wherever their point of origin is, it is not as bright as the environment that they come into when they're on this planet. So this black lens, this ET Ray-Ban, if you will, is there to protect their eyes from our sunshine and from our artificial light. But it also has another purpose. And that other purpose is, let me say, it's a focus. It's a lens to magnify an ability that they possess, to communicate with you without using a spoken language. They have an ability to telepathically communicate with me. And not only that, they have the ability to influence. So this lens works like a magnifier that focuses that intent, and that is why you will hear a lot of experiencers talk about the ETs coming up very close to them and looking at them, staring at them in their eye, and they're focusing some sort of energy, and I don't know what it is, but that's what they do. Now, with regards to their physical form, as I say, the majority of them stand between 3 and 3.5 feet. There are taller ones, but they're not quite the same. And I'll tell you about those in a minute. But the worker bees, the smaller ones, the ones that you hear about all the time, interacting with human beings, their internal organs are not the same as us. And that is because they're not the same as us. They are very, very different. Their skeletal structure is not the same as ours. They have no joints as we would understand them. In actual fact, I had one place a hand on my head, and I reached up and felt the finger, and it was just like a tube, a sort of a rubbery tube. There was no joint. And with regards to their arms, they are disproportionately long to their body. If one was to stand here now and place their hands at their sides, their fingertips would reach beyond their knees, or what we would consider to be the area where a knee would be. But once again, there is not a knee joint there. Their fingers, their hands, are without the little finger. Try this little game. Get a piece of tape and tape your finger down and see if you can operate with just 3 and your thumb. You can. These are not needed, and they don't have them. They have no no fingerprints. And why is that? I believe that is because they are organic robots. They are not beings with spirits in. When we incarnate into this life, a spirit has to come in, and that is the spark of life that makes us human beings. These are a created species. They have been created for several reasons, and one of the main reasons they've been created is to be an interface between their makers and us. Because at a very early stage, their makers found that communicating with us was like getting into a cage with a tiger. We are very unpredictable, emotional beings. We are very reactive. So the greys have been created for many reasons, but one of the main reasons is as an interface between us and them. Back in 2003, my contact changed. The greys took a step back. They stepped back into the shadows. They stepped back behind the scenery. And they were replaced, not necessarily replaced, they were joined by a new type of ET. I'll tell you how that panned out later on. But just to tell you how they look, they stand 9 feet tall. I call them the light beings. They appear, they manifest to me in a bipedal way, in a humanoid shape. But I think they do that just to put me at ease and give me something recognisable. Because the outline of their body is like a human body. Arms, legs, torso, head. But within is just light. And it's just not like one solid wall of light. It's a pulsing, moving, wriggling light. If you've ever looked at a leaf and seen the tiny detail of the leaf, all the little veins, that's what it looks like. So I believe that these ETs, these light beings, their point of origin is something more exotic. It might be what we understand to be, say, interdimensional. They come from a different vibrationary plane, and if we were to see them at their point of origin, they would appear as just light. So to manifest here is not the most easiest thing for them to do, but they house their energy within this human shape. So I can be comfortable and not overawed by what is being presented to me. They are a peaceful regulating force. That's a quote from them. That's how they see themselves. They are a peaceful regulating force and protectors of the human race. They are extremely effective in influencing situations without having to resort to any sort of force. But what I'm learning more and more is that is attributed to one being and one being only, human beings, that we influence by force. But maybe in the future we'll reach a point where we won't have to do that. In February of this year, I was visited by a new race of ETs. Only new in that I'd never seen them before, but they appeared to be human-looking ETs. Stunningly beautiful. 2 men and 1 woman. They had white blonde hair reaching their shoulders. They had crystal blue eyes that sparkled. Their skin was like marble. It wasn't that they were just fantastic to look at, but just being in their presence was being bathed in their energy. I think I've read and heard experiencers talk about these beings, and they're referred to as Nordic. I don't know about that. What I do know is that these beings are the creators of the greys. That the human-looking ETs are very, very close to us. They are they're closely related to us, let's say. And their point of origin may not be as exotic as another dimension. It may not be as exotic as a created life force. But we have a very close contact and bond with them. Over the last 10 years, I have had occasion to meet people that maybe they're a mixture. Yeah, maybe that's the best way to describe them. They're often referred to as hybrid human ETs, beings that have come out of the melting pot, that are part of some program of creation, that their DNA is a mixture of us and of their makers. Maybe that's the human-looking ETs. I don't think we would naturally mix with an ET race unless we had a similar point of origin. Therefore, these beings that I have encountered by mistake more often than not, they are very, very human. In actual fact, one of them could be sitting in this room right now, and you wouldn't know it. You wouldn't know it. You may sense something different about them. But I was in Oh, I was in New York a few years ago, and I was in a big food store up near Columbus Circle, queuing up to pay for some food, and there was one walking across the room, and I just knew straight away that this person wasn't normal, let's say. And as I stared at her, she stopped, and she turned and she stared at me, and I heard her say, "Please do not give me away. Just let me walk on and do what I am here to do." On another occasion at the UFO Congress in Laughlin, I had one of them knock at my door in the early evening. I opened it up, and there stood one of these hybrids. I experienced missing time on that occasion and haven't had the desire to investigate what occurred. But more and more are these beings being reported. More and more investigators are looking into this. You know, Bud Hopkins has looked into this about human hybrids, and I believe Barbara Lamb may be looking into this at the moment, maybe Paola Harris. But they are out there. They are part of our community. In actual fact, you might call them special human beings. They are working towards a very specific goal. I don't believe, as it is speculated on the internet, that there is some plot to overtake the human race, body invasion of the body snatchers or anything like that. But they are right under our noses. I believe they are walking the streets of this town. I know this is LA and you get a lot of people, strange people walking the streets of this town, but they are. They are operating alongside us every day. They are sitting next to us on the bus, and they are eating in our restaurants with us. So I ask you to consider something very seriously when it comes to talking about these people, because they are people, they have mothers, they have children. How alien do they now sound? Especially the human-looking ETs and these hybrids, how alien do they actually sound? So, what is ET contact all about? The more questions I seem to get answered, the more questions seem to take their place. The answers still remain elusive. After 60 years of the modern UFO era, are we any closer to discovering what this is all about? So, just like, what's her name? Alice in Wonderland. Just like Alice in Wonderland, being involved in this is a bit like disappearing down that rabbit hole. Or to make it more modern, Thomas Anderson, aka Neo from The Matrix, he has the choice of taking the blue pill or the red pill. The blue pill, he remains in the safety of his perceived world. And I believe that that's what most people are doing. I believe that we, in this community, we took the red pill a long time ago. We are down that rabbit hole. It is part of our day-to-day life, but what we are discovering is that it is something very, very real. Very, very real. It's not mystical, it's not new age, it's not science fiction, it's science fact. The ET technology is just tomorrow's science. So, in my talk this evening, what I want to do is outline a selection of my ET contact experiences. I won't have time to cover everything, so what I'm going to do is just do thumbnail sketches of a selection of the experiences that I've had. All of my ET contact over the last 50 years, because it started when I was 5 and I'm nearly 55 now, All of those contact experiences are all in my book. They are explored in great detail, and then I go on to try and work out and understand what it means, what the impact on us is on a much greater scale. You will also find chapters in my book, as Steve mentioned, about intelligence, memory, evolution, and human consciousness. My one plug and one plug only. My book is $25 on Amazon, but it's $20 tonight, and there's no postage and packing. I have a limited selection, and you get my autograph thrown in. So the other aspects of my contact have involved marks that appear on my body that can only be seen under UV light. I remember an investigator telling me a few years ago, Steve, through my investigation, I found that often when the greys touch you, they are leaving some sort of residue. But it can't be seen. But if you shine a UV light on it, it glows, this sort of yellow-greeny light. It doesn't wash off. It takes about 2 or 3 days to disappear. But eventually it goes. Now, what my wife Annie and I proceeded to do was we bought a UV light, and every single time I've had contact, we get the light and we shine it on the particular part of the body that I remember being touched, and there it is. You know, we've photographed it for, to document it, although, what does that mean in this day and age, a photograph? But there it is. I've also had the ability to summon E.T. craft to appear. This is not a party trick that I do, and it doesn't always work, because I can remember one particular night in Sedona, me and Annie sitting in a hot tub looking up at the stars, and we sat there for about 2 hours until the water got cold trying to summon something up, but it didn't come. But on occasion, I've asked a craft to appear, and it has appeared. I've even asked it to move, and it's moved. And this is just not in my presence. This is in the presence of multiple witnesses. I've been able to photograph craft that don't appear to the naked eye, that are only there after I use my digital camera to snap, 9 pictures blank, and then the 10th picture has a classic saucer-shaped craft that wasn't there when we were looking. I've had scars appear on my body with no memory of the trauma that caused them. One particular scar that appeared on my forehead here, I never knew was there. I didn't know it was there for 25 years. It was only when my hairline went south that it appeared, because it had been underneath my hairline. But I remember a particular ET contact when I was about 8, and something happened where one of the ETs pressed on my forehead and caused it to bleed, but we could never find the trauma. But there it is. And it's very strange. It's relatively small. There's something underneath it. And when I press on it, I get some very peculiar feelings inside and outside of my head. I get conscious information downloads. I first thought that it was a migraine, that I was sort of seeing sort of this flashing light in the corner of my eye. That was until this flashing light became a symbol and started ticker taping right across the front of my vision. It wasn't in my eye, it was out here. And it often happens, and I'm told I'm being downloaded with information. And not for the first time, I am being told by other experiences that it is happening to them. And other things that have happened to me, I will speak about with relevance to other contactees coming up to me and saying, "That's happened to me, Steve. I've never spoken to anybody about it, and I thought I was crazy." And then on one occasion, when I was taken on board a craft, I was taken into a room where there were 3 blank walls, and then the farthest wall looked like fish tanks piled on top of each other, from floor to ceiling, from wall to wall. Normal size looking fish tanks, about that size. In them was not water, but this blue liquid, and floating in this liquid were these little beings, embryos, fetuses. I tell you what they look like. They look like, at the end of the movie 2001, you see the Star Child floating out in space. If you haven't seen that movie, take a look at it. That's what they look like. No umbilical cord, they're just floating, and I'm told that they actually feed off this blue liquid. I believe that they may be the human ET hybrids. I was told at that moment that I had played a part in the construction of these little beings. And when I pressed for further explanation, I was told that at some point in the past I had made a donation to their program. My ET contact experiences started in 1962 when I was just 5 years old. The very first contact I had was with a grey. But it wasn't with one of the greys that I've spoken about so far. It wasn't one of these little worker bees, these little programmable organic robots. It wasn't one of them. It looked like one of them. But this one had pure consciousness, had intelligence, had spirit. And she stood over 4 feet tall. At the age of 5, I had no reference point for who they were. And because the first time I saw her, her feet weren't touching the ground, that she was up in the air, I called her the witch. Now on a sidebar, over the last 2 months, whilst I've been speaking in America, people have come up after the talk and said, "Thank you, Steve, thank you so much." I said, why is that? Because the first time I ever had contact, it was with a being that I called the witch. Annie, my wife, she had contact when she was a child. She never thought it was an extraterrestrial or anything like that. You know, we're talking about the 1850s here. But she looks a lot younger, mind you, because ET contact keeps you young. My wife is 105, and have a look at her when the lights go up, and you will want to make contact. Not only with her, but with them. But I called her the witch. And she has been there throughout the 50 years of my experience. She has been there. Maybe she doesn't come forward and actually speak with me, but she observes. She learns from me as much as I'm learning from her. She is my teacher, my guardian. In the early 60s, when I was about 6 or 7, my parents used to go out to work. Forgot to turn my timer on. I may be here sort of 2 or 3 a.m. because when I start, I don't stop. And anyway, you'll stay, won't you? We'll get coffee in and donuts. My parents used to go to work, so I was looked after by an aunt. And she used to take me on picnics. Now, we lived in central London, so greenery and trees was pretty few and far between. But there was an area, a common ground, a common land area near us called Clapham Common. And it was trees and grassland, forest, but it was very close to London life. It wasn't out in the country. Now, when we used to go and have our picnic, I used to wander off. And I used to go to the same place every time. And just before I would wander off, my aunt used to say, "Are you going to play with your friends today?" And I used to go, "Yeah, absolutely." Well, I probably didn't say absolutely. I probably said, "Yeah." And off I would wander to play with my friends. I would go to exactly the same place, wander through some thick forest area, and I would come to a clearing in the forest. Now, I'll describe to you what I saw, and this happened on more than one occasion. Remember, I had no point of reference, so I remembered it for what I thought it was. I thought it was a building. I thought it was a little hospital because of what I encountered when I went inside. But this is what I saw. It was a little building. It was probably the height of a red London double-decker bus. It was probably about the same sort of width. But it reminded me of a pie tin. It reminded me of a pie tin that my aunt used to make pies in. It had a row of windows going round the side, a dome on top, and it was on like tripod legs. I wonder what that could have been. Anyway, I used to go inside it, and inside were a group of children. They looked sickly. That's why I thought that I was in a hospital. And later on in life, I saw film of children that had had chemotherapy, and that's what my little friends looked like. They had large, disproportionately large heads, wispy bits of hair, very bulbous eyes, human-looking eyes, you know, a nose and ears and a mouth. And they wore these little smocks, but they never communicated with me. And they seemed lethargic and a little bit confused. And I just knew it was my job to play with them, to interact with them. And as I say, this happened on many occasions. There were no ETs present that I was aware of, although I'm sure we were being observed. When I used to return to my aunt, she would say, "Did you have a nice time with your friends?" And I just know now that somehow she knew. She knew what's going on. She was as different to the rest of the grown-ups in my life as I was different to my little friends. In 1973, when I was 16 years of age, I was with a group of friends one night outside of London in the suburbs. The friend was called John, and his parents, who owned the apartment we were in, had gone away for the weekend. They had taken his little sister with them. So there was me and John, and there was a handful of our other friends. We were there to worship the God that is David Bowie. We were there to sit in front of the one-eyed goggle box and watch David Bowie perform his new song. We did that. We did that with the aid of pizza and beer. Now, I didn't drink any beer that night because I just had my appendix removed. So I was on antibiotics, so I couldn't drink. But luckily enough, one of my greedy little friends drank my share of the beer. So, which meant by the end of the evening, he was rather worse for wear, inebriated, let's say, which it doesn't take much when you're 16 years of age. He was there with his younger brother. His younger brother had to call a cab. The two of them piled in and they drove off. Our remaining friends went off to their homes, but because I lived so far away, John had arranged that I was going to stay the night. He took me to his sister's bedroom, vacated for the weekend, and I got in the bed. The room had a large window going right across one of the walls, looking out onto a little car park and some trees, but it was about on the third floor of a small apartment block, so there was no need for curtains. So I lay there looking at the night sky, very happy, very content with my evening, and I fell to sleep. When I woke up the next morning, I woke up in a different environment, in a different room. There was no window. I was still lying in a bed with covers over it. All around me appeared to be boxes. There was no natural light. In the corner of the room there was a rough wooden staircase going up. My habit is that I sleep with no clothes on. I do now and I did then. So when I got out of bed, I looked for my clothes. I couldn't find them. All of this was a great puzzle to me because I remembered I was stone cold sober. I knew where I'd gone to bed, even though it was an unfamiliar room, and I knew that this wasn't the room I went to bed in. I took the bed cover, put it around me, and went up the stairs. And as I went up the stairs, there's this little voice in my head saying, John lived in an apartment. It was all on one floor, and there were no stairs. And there's this other voice saying, shut up. Because you can't explain your situation, so shut up. As I got to the top of the stairs, I pushed a little door open. I stepped into a kitchen. There was a woman standing in the kitchen. I said hello. She turned round and screamed, absolutely screamed. There was this naked, semi-naked teenage boy standing in her room, and she made it very, very clear that she had never seen me before in her life. And immediately the little voice said, "It's okay, it's John's mother. They came home early and John didn't tell her that you were staying. Obviously the apartment was more on one level and you must have been sleepwalking." That's the answer. "Okay, thanks for that. It keeps you sane." So she was shouting at me, a tirade of Anglo-Saxon profanities, which, really shocked me. This young, innocent 16-year-old boy who'd never heard words like that before. So I was shocked, and she was... So just as she took a breath, I jumped in, and I said, "It's okay, I'm John's friend." She said, "Who's John?" And right at that moment, two people appeared at my side. It was Paul, my drunken friend from the night before, and his younger brother Jimmy. They started on me now. "Steve, what are you doing here, man? We left you at John's last night. What are you doing here?" So they started to become very, very aggressive, very abusive. And I was really starting to feel very scared now. So at the point where they took a breath, I stuck my hands up. In defense, I said, "Stop it. Look, what are you saying? Are you saying that after you two left last night, I walked 3 miles across town," because that's where they lived, 3 miles across town. "I walked 3 miles across town naked in the freezing cold February weather. I found your house, although I'd never been there before. I dismantled your alarm system, broke into the house, crept down into the basement, made myself up a little bed and went to sleep. That's what you're saying." And at that moment in time, there was a huge bang. And it was the door of reason slamming on all of our minds. As each one of us tried to put something forward that would explain that happened, another door slammed and another door slammed. We stood there staring at each other, not knowing where to go. Normally in a heated discussion of some sort, there's somewhere to go. There's something to say, and maybe you can end up by saying, "Well, we'll agree to disagree." But there was nowhere to go. There was absolutely no explanation why I was there. Because what had happened was temporarily stored in the back of my mind. It would be later on I would remember what had happened. Now, we never, ever, surprisingly, spoke about this event again. This little group of lads. When we went out socialising, I attempted to bring it up on a few occasions, and Paul stared me down, as if to say, "Don't go there, man." And I didn't, because I didn't know where to go anyway. But my memory of what occurred that night did come back. I was taken from John's apartment by 3 greys. They came, they took me out of the bed, they took me through that great big window. Not opening it, through it. It's not a pleasant experience. Whatever they do, if they dismantle the molecules of the window or they dismantle mine, I don't know, but it's not pleasant. It's happened to me on a few occasions. They took me through the window, naked, floating in the air, freezing cold weather. I can still remember that hit of cold as I came out of the warm bedroom through the solid glass window, and above me was a big circular light, and I was taken up into it. During my time on the craft, certain procedures were carried out, and then I was placed in a corridor. And whilst waiting there, 2 greys came round the corner, and in the middle was a human. I wonder if you can guess who that human was. It was my drunken friend, Paul. Still drunk, wobbling, very uneasy on his feet. And do you know what? These little greys didn't know how to deal with him. Who does know how to deal with a 16-year-old drunk teenager? So I stepped up and I took Paul and I held him, and he was whimpering. He was really scared. ET contact is a challenge. It's even more of a challenge when you're paralytic, I imagine. So I took care of Paul, and they allowed me to take care of him. They watched, they observed me taking care of my friend. So the questions that come up for me is, why did they then return us both, but they returned us both to the home of Paul? They returned me there. Now, was it because they were very happy with the status quo, that I was looking after Paul, and they wanted that to continue because the situation had got out of hand? I don't know. I think that's what it was. It's speculated that these greys have no feeling or no emotion. Well, they have a limited programming. They are little Apple Macs on legs. They have a job to do. And when you throw them a curveball, they're not quite sure how to deal with it. So was it a mistake? Do you think that they make mistakes like that? You know, they collect us all up and then they do whatever they want to do and they take us back, and just like a cab, they're saying, right, drop that one there, drop that one there. Oh, that one goes up the top. And they made a mistake? No, I don't think so. They placed us back in the same house for a reason. And I suppose that would show, for want of a better word, humanity on their part. Still got 90 minutes to go. Great. Then in 1975, when I was about 18, I went on board a craft, and there, sitting on the floor, in a room that I was taken into, was a small human-looking child. She looked like a human child, no doubt about it. Everything about her was a little human child. She was about 5 or 6 years of old. She was sitting on the floor playing with what looked like little glass building bricks. She was piling these bricks, one on top of the other, and then pushing her finger through the middle brick, and the bricks on top remained floating. Magic bricks? I don't know. Or did she have some ability to make this happen, to levitate these bricks? Just like the witch, when I was a little boy, I came into the room off of the ground. Some beam of some sort had brought me in and held me and brought me down to the ground. And because she saw me coming down to the ground, she started clapping, really animated, really excited, like this, and she started singing, "Fly high in the sky, fly high, my Peter Pan." So that's what she called me. She called me Peter Pan. Now I sat down and played with her with these little bricks, and I was watching her little face, and her face was so animated and excited and so into what she was doing that, looking at her little sparkly eyes, I started just humming and then eventually singing the nursery rhyme, "Twinkle, twinkle, little star." So that's what I called her. I called her my little star. Now, I have encountered little star many times over the years during contact experiences, and she has obviously encountered her Peter Pan. On one occasion, when I was about 30 and she was in her mid-teens, she's about 14 years younger than me, we were in a situation where there were hybrid children. There were greys, but the intelligent ones, the spark of life greys, the ones that I refer to as nurses. They wear to the ground smocks, and they have a symbol on the breast of like a pole with a snake on it, very similar to the one that is used in our medical profession. A symbol that I have doodled for years and years, and I've painted. And there it was. And I think it was a symbol of what their job was. And they were holding these human ET hybrid children in their arms. There were older ones sitting on the floor. And it was the job for me and little Star to play and nurture with these children and to pass on something. We were passing on our energy to them. Now, the ramifications of the contact I've had with little Star have been great. It's been there for many, many, many years. Not every time I've had contact, but on several occasions I've been there with Little Star. I went to America back in 2003 to a friend's house in Rhode Island. It was a gathering. It was a gathering of people from the UFO community. On that particular occasion, Dr. John Mack was there, Bud Hopkins, Paola Harris, Barbara Lamb, and Annie and myself. Very, very lucky to be there amongst all those very important people. And there was somebody else sitting down by the swimming pool. And I looked down from the veranda of the back of the house and I thought, gosh, that person looks familiar. And it was only as I went down and walked across the grass that this person raised her head and looked at me, and it was Little Star. She's a 40-year-old mother of 3 children. And she's very, very human, just like me. And now we have a relationship here on planet Earth. What the questions that are raised for me during our contact is when I first met Little Star, I've since discovered by speaking to her that she lived hundreds of miles away from me down on the south coast of England, where I lived in London. And then, when she was older and I was having contact with her, she lived here in LA. And they were taking us both at the same time to the craft. Now, how is that done? Do they freeze our time? Do they stretch our time? How are they taking us from different continents, bringing us together on the craft, and then returning us? In 2004, I had an experience at my home. We live outside of London now. And a lot of my contact experiences have involved other people. A lot of experiences go through these events on their own. And it's quite a challenge because all they rely on is their honesty and the hope that when they tell their story, people believe them. However, on many occasions, my contact has involved third-party people. When I first met Little Star, I had a contact. I'll tell you about that later on. Dr. John Mack was there when it happened, and Bud Hopkins. But in 2004, on this particular event, my son was there, Reese. Annie had gone out for the evening. Reese was working on a homework project in the study, not to be disturbed. Got to get it done, Dad. Don't disturb me. So I watched TV for a while, then I went up to bed. Left him working, Annie wasn't home yet. That's the last thing I remember. I just fell asleep, I guess. When Annie got home just after midnight, she had a sense that something strange was going on. She's a very sensitive woman. She's had contact experience herself. She's a very highly developed healer and psychic. And she knew that something was not right. She came up to the bedroom. All the lights were blazing, and I was lying on the bed wearing somebody else's clothes of a different gender. Now, I have a letter from my attorney that states categorically that I am not a cross-dresser, not anymore, and Annie found me lying on the bed, and I had a woman's t-shirt on. Ill-fitting, very, very tight. It had a gaudy Hawaiian motif on the front, and it was ripped from the shoulder right across the chest. All over the front of the t-shirt was blood. There was blood hemorrhaging from my right nostril all down the front of my face. When I consciously remembered everything the next morning, I recalled that during my ET contact that night, they had implanted something up my right nostril, breaking the bone at the back and going into my brain. And it remains there to that day, causing a hemorrhage. This is not the first time it's happened, so Annie very quickly identified that the situation was not life-threatening. Okay. Having said that, I appeared to be, drunk let's say, I had my eyes open, but I really wasn't aware of what was going on. She was trying to communicate with me, but I was just staring back. So she went off to find Reese. All of his homework is across the desk in the study, but he's not there. He's in bed, fully clothed, asleep. They have come in and turned him off so they could take me from under his nose. She wakes Reese up. She says, have you seen what's happened to your dad? And he said, I don't know what you're talking about. I was doing my homework. What am I doing here? She brings him into the bedroom. Now remember the picture. Here is his father lying prostrate on the bed. Prostrate on the bed. I've got underwear on. I've got this woman's t-shirt on, and I'm covered in blood. Now, what do you think the best reaction that Reese could have made? Oh my God, Dad, are you okay? Oh, what's happened? Oh, let me clean your... No. What are you wearing, Dad? Was the best that my caring teenage son could come up with. What are you wearing, Dad? We laugh about it now. Now, with the inability to return me to the house with my own clothes on, must mean that there are other experiencers on board the craft at the same time as I. And I think that is true. Lots of people have spoke about it. Alternatively, the E.T. hat check girl wasn't looking and just gave me the wrong clothes back. I'm not sure. But I would think that it was just an error. And how, once again, just like they did with my aunt, how do they immobilise my son? What do they do? What do they do to come in and turn you off? How easy it appears to manipulate the human brain. Scary, isn't it? It's very, with the lights on me, it's very dark, and it's only because a few of you have laughed so far that I know you're still out there. Are you okay, everybody? You all right? Okay. Now, 2004 again. I was taken from the house by 3 greys. Interesting, 3. This is a pattern. Not just with me, with other contactees. When they are taken, there are 3 greys that are used to take us. Normally 1 on each elbow and 1 leading. On this occasion, it was suggested to me that I should come downstairs. I couldn't sleep and I came downstairs. And then I don't know why. I just came downstairs. And when I came into the lounge and looked down towards the dining room, I could see standing outside on the patio, I could see through the big glass doors. Well, I'll tell you what I thought I saw. I saw 3 foxes. They were 4 feet tall. They were standing on their hind legs, and they were all staring at me with these big black eyes. Of course, you know, that's more believable, isn't it? You know, there's 3 4-foot foxes with big black eyes staring at me, standing out on my patio. That's much more easy to accept than that there were 3 greys out there. But obviously some screen was being put in front of me. And this is repeated in the reports of experiencers. They see owls, they see deers. I saw foxes. They took me from the house. They took me on board a craft. What happened during the contact is not relevant to this part of the story. What is relevant is when they brought me back, they didn't leave me where they took me from, because they took me from inside the house. They left me out in the garden. They left me on the patio where the foxes had been standing. Now, as I was plonked down onto the patio and looked up at this huge craft, no more than 20 feet above the roof of my house, I know we live in the burbs, but our houses are on top of each other out there, and this was probably, I don't know, early hours of the morning, and this craft lit up everything. So there's that invisibility factor that continues to be heard, that was I the only one that could see it? If someone had looked out the window, would they have seen it? Anyway, as the craft receded, it took my memory of what had just happened with it. Full conscious memory came back the next morning, but for that moment, instant amnesia. So within 30 seconds, I'm standing there thinking, how did I get here? What am I doing? And the little voice says, it's okay, Steve, you're sleepwalking. You've put on your dressing gown, you've gone out through the front door, you've gone out into the back garden, and you've just woken up. That's what's happened. Okay, thanks for that. So I try the back door, it's locked. I look inside, it's locked from the inside. Obviously didn't come out this way, I must have come out the front. So I went round the front, the door's closed. I don't know if it's locked, it's closed. That's what happened. You came out and you closed the door, Steve. So I get some pebbles in my hand, throw them up at the bedroom window. Annie comes to the window, I gesture to her and she comes down. All the time, the little voice is saying, it's okay, Steve, you're only sleepwalking, nothing to worry about. That was until my wife appeared at the door and I heard her slide back the security chain, unlock the doors from the inside. And then as she opened the door, I knew that I hadn't been sleepwalking. And she said to me, what on earth are you doing outside? And I said, I don't know. I said with all honesty, I don't know. She had the awareness to go through the house, checking all the windows and all the doors. They were all locked from the inside. It was indisputable. Now, my wife has been behind me solid, like a rock, throughout my contact experience. And up until that point, I believed that she believed me 100%. But now I look back and I think, maybe she didn't. Maybe there was a little inkling in the back of her mind that I had a mental illness or something, that she loved me dearly, but really, she had those papers already signed. Just in case. She may still have, actually, but that's another story. But after that night, Annie signed up to the program. She became a fully paid-up member of the belief that I was having ET contact. Our life changed dramatically. From that day on, she became, if she was one step behind me, she stood beside me. And she is now involved in my work as much as I am. I could not do this without her in many ways. I spoke earlier on about going to this person's house in Newport, Rhode Island. This was 2004 as well. Busy year for me. Anne Cuvelier, a fantastic woman, very committed to the work that we are all doing, and she opens up her house once for a week in July and invites people from the UFO community. On this particular year, Annie and I was invited for the very first time. We had a fantastic week. She's got a swimming pool, looks out over Newport Sound. It is absolutely beautiful. But apart from that, you have Bud Hopkins, Dr. John Mack when he was here, Barbara Lamb, Paola Harris, right there. You can sit there and just pin them down with 1,000,001 questions for 7 days, and they're not allowed to move. And we had a lovely time. And at the end of the week, we have this big gathering, a get-together. And I was reluctant to join the table. I didn't want to come in. I was sitting outside in the garden, and Annie had to sort of shout down to the bottom of the garden for me to come in because I felt uneasy. There was something wrong. I went into the house and I sat down at the long table with all the other guests, and we were eating the meal. I was very quiet, Annie was engaged one side, everybody was talking. And then all of a sudden I realised that the room was changing. Everybody seemed to stop moving. The sound of their speech died away. until I realised I was looking at a stationary, static, three-dimensional photograph, that everybody was just frozen in time. And I remember looking at John Mack, who was just by my side, and he had a wine glass like that. And I looked down the table, and there was little Star, and she had a fork of food just about to come to her lips. After a couple of seconds, I looked back, and the wine glass that John had been holding was now at his lips. So they were still moving, but a lot slower. But I don't think it was like that. I think I was moving a lot faster. That somehow I was in a little bubble of time, and it had been speeded up. Because the next day people said, "What happened to you last night, Steve? You were there 1 second, and then you were gone. You just disappeared. We don't know where you went." Now, what happened at that moment, the moment when everybody slowed down, was that I saw something reflected in the mirror. And what I could see was a reflection of another mirror in the back room. And in that mirror were faces of little grey aliens. ETs, sorry. Little grey ET faces. And they started to come through the mirror as if it was a window. There was about half a dozen of them, and they filed into the room, and they started to walk round behind people, and they were touching people on the back of the necks. And I can still remember that cold, lifeless touch, because these greys were not the greys that I had previously been in contact with. They were very, very different, and they had a very different agenda. And I don't think it had our best intentions at heart. And then there was a flash of light that blinded me for a second. And when my eyes returned to normal, the greys were gone. They weren't in the room. And everybody started to move. And the sound of their speech came back. And people got up from the table and they were walking out into the hallway. Now, I knew that there were a couple of people that had to leave early in the next morning to catch a flight. And that was Bob and Terry Brown, the original organisers of the UFO Congress in Laughlin. And people were queuing up to say goodbye to them. So I joined the queue because I wanted to say, "It's been lovely to meet you both," and blah, blah, blah. "We'll see you soon." And as I got to the front of the queue, they walked away. They looked right through me as if I wasn't there. Thinking that I'd upset them in some way, offended them, I walked up to somebody else to say, "Have I done something wrong?" And those people looked right through me as if I wasn't there. Whew. That was the night that I was introduced to the light beings. Two of these 9-foot-tall light beings manifested at the bottom of this long hallway. And I walked towards them. Three of us turned, and we took a step forward, and I was no longer there. The description of what happened, where they took me, is a whole story on its own, and it's all in my book. But the next morning, I woke up in bed, my bed, with Annie next to me. And Annie said, "Where did you get to last night?" And I knew what had happened. But I said, "I don't know." And we went up to breakfast, and we sat down with everybody else, and I was very quiet. Sometimes after an ET contact, you feel hungover. Somebody said to me, "Are you okay, Steve? You don't seem the normal Steve." And I said, "Something happened last night." And as I finished saying it, half a dozen people around the table all said at the same time, "Yeah, me too." One person, Dr. Michael O'Connell from Harvard University, who worked with John Mack, he said, "It's strange, Steve, that I was trying to say goodbye to people in the hallway and they were just looking through me." Little Star, who was there, said to me, "There were ETs here last night, Steve, but they weren't nice ETs. But some other ETs came and shushed them away. These ETs that I call the light weavers. Another person said that she had gone out onto the veranda where everybody met up after dinner, and she said there was nobody there. It was like the house was empty. So there's all these people supporting my own experience. Now, was this their experience too, or were they just touched by what was happening to me? This bubble I was in, was it just touching other people? I don't know. Jumping ahead to 2009, I was working for an organic fruit and vegetable company. I was doing some delivery driving for them. A job that I absolutely loved, I was just out in the country all the time, driving, listening to the radio, listening to storybooks, and it was wonderful. And I was driving right out in the country between Cambridge and Essex. And as I drove through the countryside, I was really taken by the beauty of what I could see. The overwhelming beauty of the nature just stunned me. So much so that I had to pull over. I pulled over and I was just looking through the windscreen of the cab at these rolling hills, grass, trees, the birds, and I was just really, really touched. And then, in the blink of an eye, it all changed. Well, only in as much as how I perceived it. It was the same scene, the grass, the trees, the hill, but the quality of the picture went up to high definition. It was like I was watching a high definition TV. Everything became highly crisp. The colours more brighter and more defined. And as I was watching, I heard a voice say, "Can you see us now?" Now, when I have my ET contact, the telepathic communication occurs inside. Not just in my head, but in my whole body. I seem to understand and absorb what is being given to me. But this voice, I heard, it was outside of me. I thought it was the GPS. Instead of saying, turn right in 200 yards, it said, "Can you see us now?" And then it all changed again. In a flash, it just returned to the normal beauty of nature. Now, 10 days later, I was driving through inner London. Much different, not a tree in sight. And as I was driving along, I heard a very familiar sound, the chomp, chomp, chomp of a helicopter. When I stopped to make a delivery, as I got out onto the sidewalk, I looked up and there was a helicopter far too low. Guess what? It was black and it had no markings. It had black windows as well. Not the first time I've encountered these menacing human objects. But on this occasion, this was in inner London, and it was very, very low. Chomp, 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 chomp. Nobody else was looking up. I was standing there staring at it. And as I stared, this helicopter turned to face me, and then it tipped, nose down. It looked like a big black shark. And as is my wont, I waved. A little trick my wife introduced a few years ago when they appeared over our house, and she waved. "Oh, please, Annie, don't wave." She waved. And they fly off. So if any of you encounter these people, wave. They don't like it somehow. I tried to ring Annie to let her know what was going on. I couldn't get through. So I sent her a text. Bit silly, really, because the text said, "Black helicopter following me." That's it. Texts are so dangerous in a way. So I drove out of the city back into the country. The phone rang. "Annie, what is going on?" "Everything's fine." "Well, what do you mean? The message, I said it was fine. It was just a helicopter and it's gone. See, my wife has more faith in the ETs taking me, then returning me safely, than she does with these bloody, whatever they are, human beings, taking me and not returning me. She has more faith. And in my experience, the scariest beings I've ever encountered have been human beings. So when I had one more delivery to do. It was out in the country, as I say. It was in a country lane. This lane was miles long, straight. You could see either way for miles. There was this one cottage, tiny little cottage, by the side of the road. I pulled up on the other side of the road to the cottage. Now, as I got out of the truck to walk round the back to get this package out, I'm still looking at the sky, looking for these helicopters. So as I walk round the back of the truck, before I know it, I've bumped into somebody. Now, at this moment, an alarm bell should have gone off. An alarm bell should have gone off and said, what you're encountering here, Steve, is not normal, not natural, you should question it. But this little voice shut up. It didn't say anything on that day. I think this little voice was shut off, turned off, for a reason I'll go into in a moment. Because there, standing at the back of the truck, was what appeared to be a person. This person was a female. She must have been at least 7 feet tall. She was Amazonian in structure, huge. And she said to me, still looking for those helicopters? You got anything to say? No. I laughed and went, yeah. And then she said, you need to let her know that they will never be allowed to harm you. Nothing? Nothing. I went, oh, okay. And then she leant forward, and with 3 fingers, she pressed me on the forehead. With, not softly, not hard, with just a little amount of force to just make my head rock back. And as she did that, I heard that voice again. It was her voice. And she said, you can see us now. It's time to wake up. And then I blinked. And as I blinked in that fraction of a second, I realised I was pulling onto the freeway and joining the fast-moving traffic. There was a jump. From that moment, you can see us now. It's time to wake up. And then there was a jump. When I got home, I told Annie what had happened. She gets the UV light out, and there, in the centre of my forehead, are 3 circles, the fingertips of the touch. So, what I find interesting, or the questions that I raise in the book about this, was a mental screen put in my head that I didn't say, oh my goodness, there's a 7-foot Amazonian woman standing here that is obviously a human-looking ET or hybrid, and she's saying that thing that I heard in the truck last week. None of that happened. So a screen occurred. Now, were the ETs in the area and the military or whatever these powers that be knew that they were going to make contact with me somehow, and they sent the helicopter out? Or, as I think, that they became aware that the ETs became aware that the military were following me, and they interceded somehow. That's what I think. Because since 2003, when I began my contact with the light beings, I have had constant, open contact with them. It's happening right at this second. It's like a phone rang and I took it off the hook, and it's been there ever since. That I can speak to them, they can speak to me, even to the extent that when I returned in 2003 after my contact with the light beings, I left a part of me there. But the 100% of me that is here now is with a part of them in me. I'll very quickly tell you just one more thing. Before I start rounding up, I'll tell you one more thing that happened just recently. In February, when I was contacted by the human ETs, the woman said to me, we are aware of the work you are doing. We are aware that you are going to America to talk about us. And it is formidable, the amount of energy you're putting into this. I'm over here for 4 months, just doing talks continuously. She said, you need to be aware that we are with you. You know that, but on this trip, I will be with you. I will be with you to support you, to offer guidance and nurture. And she said also, at one of the events, I shall step forward and make myself known to you. You sometimes take these gestures with a pinch of salt, and you think, oh my God, really? You're going to step forward? And then you come away from the contact experience and you get involved in the normal world, the matrix. You get overwhelmed and you think, yeah, that's not going to happen. I spoke at the Ozark UFO conference in Eureka Springs. Absolutely beautiful. If you ever get the chance to go out to Arkansas just for a visit, please go to Eureka Springs. After I spoke there, I went to my table to sign some books, and there was a big group of people around my table, and I kept being distracted. I kept looking to the left of me and thinking, something's there, but I kept looking and there was nothing there. Until one point I looked over and there was a woman there. And it was her. She didn't appear as I had seen her last. She wasn't stunningly beautiful with blue eyes and blonde hair, but it was her. And she was standing about 20 feet away from me, but I heard her when she spoke, because everybody else around me, who were all shooting questions at the same time, all went quiet. And I heard her say, what you are doing is very important. Please continue. And then I sort of took a little gulp of breath, and she wasn't there anymore. But the next day, somebody came up to me and said, Steve, I had a really strange experience when I was watching you when you were signing your books. And I said, okay, what was that? And he said, as I was staring at you, you kept looking over to the left, and there was nothing there. And I kept thinking, what on earth is he looking at? And you just kept doing it. And then all of a sudden, I realised that there was a woman there. And he went on to describe exactly what this woman looked like. And he said, but the only peculiar thing was she was there for a few seconds, and then she just popped out as if a light switch had gone off, and she disappeared. So there's that confirmation again. It's really nice to know that the chances that I am crazy are getting less and less. So what have I learnt from my ET contact? Or I'm not sure if I can answer that question. What I can say is that I have decided to take something from it. Something constructive, something productive, something that will help me and help our community and help our joint work, the work that we all do. I believe that ET contact isn't about them. It never has been. ET contact is about us. All of us in this room. It isn't about UFOs and aliens in Roswell. It isn't about lights in the sky or crashed aircraft. It's about this fantastic community that you and I are all part of. People like us who are putting our reputations on the line every day, trying to get our singular voices heard. I propose that ET contact is about us, the human race, and how we might consider responding what is being presented to us. I believe that ET contact, therefore, is a trigger, that it is actually a tool to awaken us to our true potential. ET contact is in actual fact a route map for our transition from one stage of our evolution to the next. So based on the information that the ETs have shared with me, what do I know in my heart to be a truth? Now, I'm not somebody who is well versed in the technical aspects of the world I live in, of science, of biology, or anything like that, but the ability that I do have is to take certain information and I am able to translate it into an understandable format, a format that is free from jargon, from technical information. I am able to translate information into a dialogue that you would have over your garden fence with your neighbour, across the table at work, or in the bar with your friends. One piece of information that I would like to touch on is about the evolution of our bodies. I want to talk to you about DNA. Before I was told, and then later on went on to investigate it, because everything I'm being told by the ETs, I go out and go onto the all-knowing oracle that is called the internet. I go out there and do my investigation, and I'm finding that the stuff that they are telling me is being worked on out there. So it's just not something that I'm telling you. Everything I'm telling you from here on in, as I start to wind up, you can find out about on the internet. You can find out about in the scientific community. DNA is the manual. It's the instruction book, if you will, for the human body. It tells the human body what to do. Now, 10% of our DNA does that. 10% of our DNA creates the proteins that is necessary to make me. The remaining 90% does... nobody knows. The scientific community doesn't know. I'll tell you the extent to what they don't know is that they call this 90% junk DNA. Junk DNA. They are suggesting that science, that nature, when they created the human race, they got DNA and they said, okay, well, we need 10% to create the body and we've got this other 90% left over. What are we going to do that? Oh, well, don't worry about that. Put it to one side and we'll probably use it later on down the road. Nature doesn't make mistakes. Nature created 100% of our DNA to do a job. I like to call this 90% sleeping DNA. And this sleeping component of our DNA, I believe, is going to prove to be a fundamental part of the awakening of our human consciousness. It's going to play a part that will take us from the matrix into something completely different. It's going to help us shift. So, sleeping DNA is a conscious design factor. It's the fingerprints of our Maker. And they're saying, we were here. If we are looking for proof of extraterrestrial life, of ETs, here we are. It's been inside us all along. This is just not my theory. This is real. Go out there and investigate it, please. 90% of our DNA is the fingerprint of our makers. So I believe that by stimulating this DNA, this 90% of our DNA, this sleeping element of our creation manual, it's going to activate additional senses in us. Now, this awakening of our DNA is a natural organic process that started in the late 80s and will culminate in the next few years. It is happening to most people naturally. Some people will fight it because they don't want to shift. They are very happy to remain in this dense, three-dimensional material world. There are powers that be that do not want this shift to occur, because after the shift, we will not be sheeple anymore. We will not be controllable. We will not be able to be manipulated anymore. So I refer to things like telepathy, precognition, extrasensory perception, clairvoyance, telekinesis. All these sort of things are laying dormant in us. But we are going to be able to encourage, to stimulate this DNA awakening even further. Now we require a tool, some sort of natural organic device to magnify, to focus this positive intent, this wish, this need to be something more, to be something wonderful, to be a better human being. And this thing exists. It's always been there. Human research has proven, beyond doubt, that there is a field of energy that connects all of us. An invisible net that bonds everything together, not just on this planet, but throughout the existence of life in the cosmos. The British biologist Rupert Sheldrake called it a morphic resonance. It has been called many things throughout the ages because we have always known about this. It's been called the ether field, the energy grid. Through an experiment, and this is fact and this is out there, through an experiment carried out by the United States Air Force in 1986, it was proven beyond any doubt that this invisible ether field actually exists. Your government, your military did this test and proved it. The life-altering results of this test were published in the scientific journal Nature in their August edition of 1986, volume number 332. Go onto Nature's website, look into their archives, and you will find this information. Beyond any doubt, this is real. Now, the only thing is, this now changes. It changes everything. Because there are scientific careers that have been built on the fact that this doesn't exist, that it's not real, that there is not this invisible network of energy that connects us all. So, this energy field that connects everything, it means things like remote viewing. It means things like prayer, absent healing, positive visualization, actually have a basis in reality. It means there is a truth about mind over matter. That our thoughts, our intention, our will can have physical effect on matter and influence the world we live in. All we've got to do is pick up this telephone and connect with this energy grid. So with that in mind, it is possible for our intent to therefore have an effect on this sleeping DNA. If it is our will and our intent to do so, we can do it. This is not just words coming out of my mouth. This is a real thing. My words right now are entering into this energy grid and going out there and affecting you on levels you won't understand until later. We need to use our power of intent combined with the energy of our heart. And we need to make some very clear changes to our day-to-day behaviour, because that's how we can manifest change. Now, I'm very, very focused on practical application. There are lots of motivational speakers out there that will talk to you about raising your consciousness and things like that. But where's the practical application? Let me tell you what I did. I started 5 years ago and I've made changes. It's a practical plan. And it means about doing making tiny little changes to your day-to-day behaviour. It means about carrying out simple acts of kindness. It means something simple as opening a door for somebody, making eye contact, exchanging that energy, making a difference, wave somebody out when they're pulling out in their car. Don't feed that energy filled with aggression or negative feelings. We have to start behaving differently. And I suggest, as I've suggested to many people over the last few months, that you carry out a little program. And I've had feedback from people who are doing this, and it's working. You may think your actions are single grains of sand, but let me tell you, those single grains of sand become a beach. And we are the people who can make that change. But this is really something special. So for 60 minutes tomorrow, take an hour out of your day to remain focused on your intent. Take responsibility for your words and actions. You may think, well, I do that, Steve. Well, good on you, and keep on doing it, and get other people to do it. To remain focused on your behaviour, on what you're saying and what you're doing for 60 minutes is not easy. I still struggle because life is very, very overwhelming. Life is very distracting. John Lennon said, life is what happens whilst you're busy making other plans. And that is true. We've got bills to pay, we've got kids to see to, we've got traffic to drive in, we've got work to do. But we have got to change our behaviour. And it's happening right here and now. That is why people like us come together. Because on a conscious or subconscious level, we know we are part of a change. And with regards to change, let me say something. There is a word that is circulating in our community more and more and more, the D word, disclosure. If anybody in this room is waiting for Mr. Obama to make disclosure, stop holding your breath. I can't remember who's in charge of my country, but it ain't going to come from him either. If anybody is waiting for the powers that be to make a disclosure about the secret of ET contact, it isn't going to happen in our lifetimes. They have no reason to do so. There is nothing to be gained. They have dug themselves into such a deep hole now, they couldn't get out if they wanted to. So if you want disclosure, we have to do it ourselves. Every single person in this room has the ability to go out into the community beyond people like us and start making disclosure. Tell your postman, tell your teacher, tell your friends, tell your family at the risk of upsetting or alienating them. Tell them what you know to be a truth, because disclosure is only going to come from us. We are our own disclosure. So I wonder what you will ultimately take from this presentation. Obviously, it's entirely up to you. And one thing that should be clear by now is that you have free will. You have the ability to choose, to make choice. In all things we have a choice. And don't believe that we can get away with saying, well, I had no choice. We do have a choice in everything. There are things that happen through choice, but we can make choice. We have our free will. I believe that something wonderful is happening to us right at this second, right now. And not only do we have front row seats, we are the biggest show in town. People think that Earth is out on the edge of the Milky Way, but we are not in the boondocks. Contrary to what other people think, we are the centre of attention for the rest of the cosmos. The cosmos is looking at us right now. Literally, the eyes of the universe are on us right now. We are, at this moment, the greatest show in town. And you know it in your hearts. You know that although we look out and we see the trouble and the strife that is going on in the world, we know that we have something special to offer. We have such a valuable contribution to make to this shift, to this raising of human consciousness. We are being invited to partake in the dance of life. ET Contact is that. ET Contact has always been that. It's been an invitation, and it's time for us to respond to that invitation. It's time for us to join the dance. I thank you very, very much. Thank you.